Something incredible just happened at Brown's practice, and almost nobody's talking about it. What was supposed to be a routine afternoon workout turned into the most lopsided quarterback performance the coaching staff says they've seen in decades. Forget media spins, press conference cliches, or carefully packaged narratives. This wasn't a friendly competition. This was a takeover, live, unfiltered, and powerful enough to send shockwaves through the entire organization. Insiders on site say the performance gap between the quarterbacks was so overwhelming, so publicly undeniable, that it redefined the depth chart in real time. And it wasn't just about tape. The locker room felt it, the coaches saw it, the players reacted. One QB emerged as the clear franchise future. The other left watching his career drift further out of reach with every rep. If you've been following the Sanders versus Gabriel debate since draft night, if you've wondered how this wildcard QB would fit into an already tense quarterback room, you need to hear what really went down this week. Because what happened at Wednesday's practice may have just reset the future of the Cleveland Browns completely. By all outward appearances, Wednesday's practice was just another midweek installation session, the kind coaches barely even break down on film. The quarterback reps were scripted. The progressions were standard. The purpose? Simple. Run through the 7-on-7 install, sharpen red zone timing, and evaluate two developing QBs, Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, under identical circumstances. But from the very first snap, it was clear. This wasn't going to be routine. According to multiple sources with access inside the Browns facility, the mood shifted almost immediately after the quarterbacks rotated in. Coaches weren't huddled around markers or tracking footwork mechanics anymore. They were watching something very different, unfold a performance gap so wide, so blatantly obvious, that nobody could pretend this was still a fair fight. See, this wasn't your typical rookie versus rookie evaluation. It wasn't about upside or teaching moments or patience. This was about presence, about command, about watching one quarterback walk onto the field and transform the way the offense moved, while the other scrambled just to keep up. And the separation? It didn't take long to surface. Sanders stepped in with the composure of a 10-year vet. Coaches described it as almost cinematic, like watching someone execute a script at full speed without missing a beat. His first 3 throws didn't just hit targets, they hit windows early, before breaks, with anticipation that looked nothing like a rookie still processing the playbook. And while that might sound exaggerated, this came from people who've seen hundreds of young quarterbacks cycle through the league. These weren't fan comments. These were offensive assistants blinking in real-time disbelief, watching footwork that looked NFL-ready, eyes staying downfield, shoulders square through the throw, timing aligned perfectly with layered route combinations. Every quarterback coach preaches rhythm. Very few players at that level can create it. But Shedeur? He didn't just work inside the system, he elevated it. On a basic rollout design that should have been a check down or a safe flat throw, Sanders instead skipped progression 2 and nailed a pinpoint 18-yard comeback to the boundary before the receiver even turned his head. One coach was overheard muttering under his breath, "Who does that on install day?" Meanwhile, the sideline reaction started to tell a far more revealing story. Veteran receivers raised eyebrows, hand gestures flew. Linemen glanced over at the coaches. They weren't reacting to flash, they were reacting to a quarterback who made everything suddenly feel easier. Still, that kind of start could be written off as adrenaline, right? A lucky run? A couple clean reads? But then came Gabriel's turn. And if Sanders lit the field on fire, Gabriel looked trapped under the smoke. First rep, missed read. Second rep, late delivery. Next one, interception in red zone. The kind of pick that makes coaches drop their clipboards. Multiple staffers reportedly had their hands on their heads. Not in frustration and disbelief, wide receivers slowly walked back to the huddle with their arms completely limp at their sides. One shook his head without saying a word. Another just looked straight at the sideline and didn't even pretend to reset his focus. It wasn't just bad quarterbacking, it was a collapse in front of teammates, staff, and evaluators who'd spent months preparing this quiet little internal battle. And suddenly, it wasn't internal anymore. A staff member who's worked around the team for years described it perfectly. You could feel the shift. Not on film, not in numbers on the field. And no one needed to say a word. You just knew it was over. Dylan Gabriel, the presumed third-round developmental project, was watching the practice and quite possibly the job slip right through his fingertips. Because this wasn't quarterback development anymore. It was a takeover in broad daylight. And it was just getting started. There's playing well. There's outperforming expectations. And then, there's what Shedeur Sanders did next. What started as a few crisp completions quickly turned into a clinic, but not a flashy, highlight reel, helmet off for the camera's performance. This was deeper than that, more controlled, more real. Observers on the field weren't just amazed by his throws. They were stunned by how calm he looked as everything around him sped up. Sanders wasn't reacting to the defense, he was dictating to it. Reports from inside the building confirm what the tape likely won't show. The guy was literally processing faster than the defense could adjust. Footwork was clean, calm, and balanced. Ball placement wasn't just accurate, it was surgical. Everything landed on time, in stride, and exactly where the root concept designed it to be. No floaters, no delay, no panic. For the first time, all camp veteran wide receivers reportedly began communicating mid-play subtly at first. Shoulder shrugs, eyes widening. One even turned toward a position coach after a sideline route, gesturing to say, "That's the one, he's the guy." According to one offensive assistant, it wasn't just completion after completion, it was understanding in real time. He knew where the leverage was going to be 2 seconds before the defense even shifted. And in football, that's everything. When a quarterback moves through progressions without breaking stride, when he can shift his eyes without shortening his footwork rhythm, he's no longer surviving the scheme. He's mastering it. The throw that reportedly broke everything open wasn't even flashy on paper. It wasn't 60 yards downfield or some sideline toe-tap laser. It was a 12-yard timing throw to the slot, placed right on the third window in between a squatting linebacker and a safety floating late, a no-throw zone for most rookies. Shedeur didn't blink, delivered it early. First down. The sideline erupted. Linemen clapped. Receivers' chest bumped. Even a few defensive backs nodded, like they'd just seen exactly what they didn't want to admit. And the energy shift? You could feel it, across the entire practice field. Until that point, it had all been technical reps, drill structure, and quiet positional notes. But once Sanders took control of the huddle, the tone wasn't developmental anymore. The offense was alive. Some players instinctively drifted closer to the huddle between plays not because coaches told them to, but because they wanted another rep with him. They weren't waiting their turn. They were buying in fast. That's not something you teach. That's something a quarterback commands. Meanwhile, Gabriel was still rotating through other segments, downfield screen work, footwork drills, low-pressure install reads, but every throw seemed to drop with less conviction. The difference was impossible to ignore, almost painfully so. And here's where the internal dynamic flipped. Because this was no longer about comparing two promising young quarterbacks. This was now about choosing a direction for an entire franchise. According to sources close to the offensive room, Sanders' rhythm didn't just help his side of the ball, it elevated everyone. The running backs ran sharper timing routes, the linemen fired off better angles. The entire unit started looking like a fully operational, professional, balanced attack. Not a rookie group. A weekend ready unit. And within minutes, the whispers began. Not from media, not from fans, but inside the facility. We're not watching a quarterback battle, we're watching a quarterback arrival. That's when the gap stopped being verbal. It started being felt, because dominance isn't always loud. Sometimes, dominance walks into the room respectfully, throws 3 completions in rhythm, and then reminds everyone without a single word that this team now has a quarterback. And as one insider said, you could just feel the switch flip. This wasn't Shedeur climbing his way into the race. This was the moment he said, "I've already won." While Sanders was quietly taking over the offense, Dylan Gabriel was staring at something far more terrifying. A live public unraveling with no place to hide. After Sanders' series of flawless reps, the coaches blew the whistle and rotated quarterbacks. All eyes shifted toward Gabriel. The moment was set, the script said it was his turn to answer back. Balance the scale, prove he still belonged in the conversation. What followed was nothing short of disastrous. The first rep, an off-balance dropback. Gabriel looked jittery from the snap. His pump fake came too late, and by the time he released, the ball sailed 5 yards over his receiver's head and landed right at the feet of a defensive coach on the sideline. Nobody said a word. The silence was louder than any critique. Second rep. Late read, high throw over the middle, tipped at the line, nearly intercepted. Third. A check-down attempt that missed the tight end by a full step on a throw delivered from 10 yards out. At that point, even routine completions felt painful. Every route looked rushed. Every decision was second-guessed. His footwork broke down consistently, his release came late, and his body looked tight. Not tense like an athlete locked in. Tense like someone who knew the job was slipping away. And then came the moment people around the facility described with one word: brutal. Red zone reps. A scripted fade call to the back corner, something every quarterback on the roster had executed a dozen times that week. Gabriel dropped back, turned to load up, and double-clutched. The ball came out late, floated high, and was picked off easily by a safety camping under it the entire route. Hands immediately went to helmets across the sideline. And that's when the body language started to betray what everyone was already thinking. Receivers walking back to the huddle didn't make eye contact. Linemen leaned on each other, hands on hips, eyes down. What was unspoken just minutes ago had now become visibly overwhelming and irreversible. One veteran player reportedly muttered to himself while walking off the field, "We can't win with this." The coaches? Equally stunned. One source said a position coach looked ready to throw the practice script into the air. Another assistant was seen with his hands on his knees, staring at the ground like he'd just watched a starter fall apart on game day. And perhaps most symbolic of all, nobody said anything to Gabriel. No claps, no next play, no leadership huddle. Just an empty space around him while he slowly jogged back behind the play stack, face flushed, eyes locked on the grass. On the very next rep, Sanders stepped back in like nothing had happened and delivered a back shoulder laser in between two defenders for a touchdown. The offense erupted. Receivers chest bumped again. Linemen clapped. Even some defenders nodded in respect. The emotional contrast between the two quarterbacks wasn't just clear, it was unsettling. Staffers felt the shift instantly because it wasn't physical anymore. This wasn't just about mechanics or scheme fluency. It was about confidence, presence, belief. And Gabriel, drafted 2 rounds earlier, was losing every ounce of it in real time. Multiple offensive personnel sources shared the same quote. "The offense only works when Shedeur's in. It stalls the second he leaves. Everyone sees it. Nobody says it publicly, but they all know." And that's the dangerous thing in an NFL locker room. Once players feel the quarterback position has already been decided by energy, not by title, it's almost impossible to walk that back. For Gabriel, this wasn't just a bad practice rep, this was a free fall, and he might be the only one who didn't realize he'd already hit the floor. Because what was originally built as a quarterback duel between 2 promising young players is rapidly turning into a one-sided collapse. And if things weren't bad enough, they were about to erupt into something far more personal. At some point, the competition stopped looking like a battle. It started looking like a blowout. And then, Sanders delivered the throw that broke the moment. Midway through team period, the coaches called a non-padded, tempo script series. Snap the ball, read fast, get it out, simulate red zone tempo, minimal pressure, just a rep in flow. But Shedeur wasn't treating it like a simulation. Not anymore. On the second play of the series, the coverage shifted. A safety dropped late, tight window. Quarterbacks are usually trained to hold that throw live to fight another down. Not Shedeur. He let it rip, 45 yards downfield. Right between 2 converging defenders. Not just accurate, perfect. The kind of throw you usually only see from elite NFL starters with 40 starts behind them. Velocity, anticipation, timing all in sync. And when the ball hit the receiver in stride, just past the pylon, the entire field exploded. Receivers raced to the end zone, high-fiving, pointing at Sanders mid-sprint. Linemen were chest-bumping and slapping helmets. The sideline lost it. Even position coaches, guys who were supposed to stay cool no matter what, were visibly caught, reacting, grabbing play sheets, shaking heads, laughing with disbelief. More telling than all of that? Defensive players started nodding. Quietly, respectfully. Not mockingly respectfully. Because what do you even say when a rookie just hit a throw that 90% of the league won't even attempt, let alone complete? Energy doesn't lie. And this energy? It wasn't hype, it wasn't buzz, it was belief. There are moments in a player's camp where the switch flips not because of a stat or a pass or a headline, but because everyone watching just knows. And after that throw, they knew. Then the rotation came again. Gabriel stepped back in, whether he wanted to or not, whether he was ready or not. And on his first throw, a missed checkdown. Badly missed. The kind of pass you hit in your sleep. The kind of throw quarterback coaches would normally ignore. But this time, silence. Ice cold. No claps, no let's go, no coaching feedback. Just a quiet scan of the field, eyes on the grass, arms folded, head shakes. Teammates walked back toward the huddle in silence. Nobody said it out loud. Nobody had to. The gap had gone from performance evaluation to emotional reality. That silence wasn't just a reaction to bad football. It was the team's way of saying what everyone already believed. This isn't close anymore. This is done. And it wasn't just the throws or the misfires. It was the body language around Gabriel. Receivers stopped checking back with him. RBs drifted away to take instructions from assistants. One lineman pulled Sanders to the side during the water break just to review blitz pickups. That's organic leadership movement. That's what happens when teammates don't care who was drafted higher. They care who gives them a real shot to win. And by this point in practice, that wasn't a quiet undercurrent. It was written across the entire offense's identity. One insider on-field described the shift in 10 brutal syllables. They've already chosen, the coaches just haven't said it yet. And Gabriel? He saw all of it. He felt all of it. And the pressure already breaking him during reps began turning into something else. Frustration, resentment, emotion. Because there's one thing worse than losing your job. It's losing your team, while they're still right in front of you. And that's when everything boiled over in the worst possible way. By the time the final install period began, everyone on the field knew the truth. Shedeur Sanders wasn't earning respect anymore. He had already taken it. The final portion of practice was structured around hurry-up tempo, full team simulation, a chance to see how both quarterbacks handled pressure, speed, and real-time script management. Coaches wanted to simulate chaos, but it was Gabriel's confidence that would pay the price. First up, Sanders. From snap one, the offense moved like a machine. He diagnosed defensive shifts as they happened, spread the play out wide when needed, then hit 2 layered route trees back-to-back. 5 consecutive completions. Every player in sync. Receivers weren't just in position, they were anticipating the ball before their breaks. The play clock was crushed. Line changes were smooth. The operation was clean. Possession finished with Shedeur ripping a strike into the seam for a 22-yard touchdown. Under pressure, with a collapsing pocket, never flinching. And when it hit, the reaction didn't just come from his huddle. The entire offensive sideline surged forward. Starters, backups, rotational guys, practice squad members. People moved toward him. Not because they were told to, but because they felt it. The excitement wasn't hype, it was validation. Proof. This wasn't development, this felt like a declaration. Even defensive players started circling closer to listen. Not chirping, observing, watching. Because as one coach quietly put it, players know what real looks like, and every one of them saw it today. And just like that, the switch flipped. Physically and emotionally, teammates began reorganizing themselves. Shedeur became the center of gravity, not because it was staged that way, but because leadership had moved. Then Gabriel stepped back in, and the silence returned. Snap 1, overthrow on first down high, behind the tight end. Snap 2, delayed decision led to a blown sack. Snap 3, complete timing bust. The offense broke down completely. Wide receivers peeled off the route tree early. A running back walked to the sideline checking his arm, likely just buying time. And that's when it got awkward. Painfully awkward. Some linemen migrated closer to Shedeur, even though Gabriel was still under center. They leaned toward his side of the bench between reps. Running backs gathered behind him during water break. Receivers weren't even subtle anymore. One openly shook his head after a mistimed slant from Gabriel and went straight to a coach without saying a word. Gabriel saw everything. He saw the players drifting away, both physically and emotionally. He saw the huddles breaking without him. He saw the laughter and connection forming around a guy the media had called a long-term project. And then it happened. As reps ended and the team began resetting for conditioning, Gabriel reportedly approached Sanders directly. Energy sharp, hands gesturing, body language tense. Multiple players nearby said the tone was visibly aggressive, not confrontational, but definitely heated. Insiders say Gabriel was upset that players were ignoring the chain of command. that teammate stopped looking to the third-round pick and started anointing the fifth-rounder. That his job, his role, had just been taken right in front of him. But Shedeur didn't yell. He didn't posture. He didn't take the bait. Instead, he pointed straight at the field they just walked off, as if to say, "I don't need to argue. Look what just happened." And that was the moment. The one that nearly halted practice altogether. Coaches saw the tension spike and moved in fast. Position assistants tried to physically place space between the two. Veteran players huddled near both quarterbacks, forming a quiet, protective circle, not out of panic, but out of urgency. Because for the first time all off-season, things had gotten very real. No cameras, no press releases, no PR spin. Just one quarterback watching the team slip away and another establishing dominance, not with volume, but with precision. As one staffer said afterward, Dylan didn't lose control because he was challenged. He lost control because he witnessed the shift and couldn't stop it. And while practice eventually resumed, the mood was different. Tensy, focused, quiet, because something had cracked. Not just between two quarterbacks, but inside the entire Browns locker room. What started as simmering frustration finally boiled over, but it didn't erupt like a Hollywood brawl. It hit harder because of how close it came to melting down in front of everyone. By the time Gabriel stepped off the field following his final failed series, the atmosphere was already volatile. His face was tight. He hadn't spoken to teammates. His body language said everything. Clenched jaw, 1,000-yard stare, slight shake of the head every couple seconds, like he was replaying the breakdown in his mind, frame by frame, unable or unwilling to let it go. And Shedeur? Calm, centered, surrounded by players, not elevated, not cocky, but clearly the magnet the entire offense had pulled toward. And that's what triggered it. As players circled up for end-of-practice walkthroughs, Gabriel reportedly broke formation and approached Shedeur near the sideline. No cameras caught it, no shouting was heard from across the field. But everyone nearby saw the body language. It was intense. No punches thrown, no screaming match, not yet. But it was loud enough, clear enough, and heated enough that multiple coaches immediately moved to step between them. Insiders who witnessed the moment firsthand say it wasn't just frustration. It was desperation. Dylan Gabriel had realized what everyone else in the locker room already accepted. The job was gone. Not officially, but functionally, emotionally, practically. It wasn't a fair fight anymore, and deep down, he knew it. Sources say his words were sharp, something along the lines of, "You don't get to walk in here and take my room," followed by Sanders calmly pointing back toward the field and saying absolutely nothing. That single gesture sent a louder message than anything words could have delivered. As if to say, "I didn't take anything, you lost it." Nearby players formed a quick huddle, intervening just enough to create space. A few grabbed Gabriel by the arm, others stood between them defensively. The tension didn't escalate further, but it hung in the air, thick and unresolved. Coach Kevin Stefanski and senior staff didn't yell, they didn't blow whistles, they just paused, stepped in slowly, and whispered. Because they knew the media was watching. Beat writers, local reporters, team photographers, all of them on the far side of the field, staring down a locker room moment that wasn't supposed to be happening in public daylight. And just like that, quietly but efficiently, the Browns coaching staff began damage control. No more reps, no more installs. Position groups were shuffled, conversations were redirected, players were told to hydrate and refocus before media availability. From the outside, it looked like a normal transition into cool-down. From the inside, it was a complete scramble to protect the organization from a total public fracture. One source inside the building said it best, "You're not just hiding a quarterback controversy anymore. You're hiding a leadership crisis." Because Sanders hadn't gone rogue, he hadn't even tried to spark tension. He kept his head down and let the performance speak. But that's exactly what made the moment hit harder. He didn't just win drills, he won players, he won trust, and he did it without politicking for it. Gabriel, meanwhile, felt it in real time, watched as the team around him migrated, celebrated their new leader, and left him standing alone on the edge of the depth chart, surrounded by noise, but no support. And the coaching staff? They saw it all unfold, every throw, every stare, every sideline shuffle. And that's why they chose silence at the post-practice presser. Kevin Stefanski declined to comment on the quarterback rotation, ignored direct questions, dodged any mention of the emotional moments late in the session. But it was the look on the coaches' faces that said more than any carefully worded press release ever could. Avoided eye contact. Tight-lipped. Their energy had changed. Because now it wasn't about development timelines. It was about keeping control of a room that had just made its own decision. Practice ended without another snap. No final thought speech from Coach Stefanski. No 60-second kneel-down talk. No high-energy closeout like they usually do before media enters. Just a long, low whistle. And everyone scattered. But make no mistake, it wasn't about practice wrapping up. It was about containing what had just happened. From players to staffers to team media people, there was one shared conclusion by the time cleats hit the hallways. Something cracked today, and no one had the words or the freedom to talk about it. Let's start with the coaching staff. When Stefanski stepped in front of reporters post-practice, he wore the look of a man who had just seen something internal turn far more explosive than public perception could ever grasp. His answers were clipped, measured, robotic. We'll watch the film. It's always a process. Both guys did some good things. A flat-out lie, according to half a dozen people inside the facility. Because no one, not one single player, coach, or staffer, came away from practice believing both guys did some good things. They came away knowing one player had just taken the job, and the other might not even be on the roster in a month. Reporters picked up on it fast. One noted that Stefanski refused eye contact during any quarterback question. Another tweeted that the post-practice vibe was, quote, more tense than productive, like a team trying to pretend it didn't just see its depth chart implode. But that wasn't even the most telling reaction. The locker room told the real story. Inside, veterans weren't analyzing film or rewatching reps on tablets like usual. They were talking in low voices behind half-closed doors to position coaches, to captains, to one another. Not about game plans, not about matchups, but about the shift. An emotional, team-wide realignment that had just unfolded in full public view. One player reportedly told a coach flatly, "We already know who the guy is. Just let it happen before this blows up." Another said, "It's a different team when Shedeur is in. Don't need to run film to see it." But you wouldn't hear those quotes on the record. That's the Browns' internal rule: control the message before the message controls you, which is why, publicly, nothing was said. But privately, it was deafening. Shedeur's locker had a small crowd around it. Not reporters, not marketing staff, teammates, RBs asking for timing tweaks, linemen chatting through signals, WRs sharing nods, subtle ones, the kind that only happen when a team's hierarchy has just shifted like tectonic plates repositioning under your feet. Meanwhile, Gabriel's locker was almost empty. One backup TE patted him on the back. That was it. He sat there silently, helmet on the bench, towel around the back of his neck, scrolling through his notes, pretending everything was still normal. But according to one person inside the room, it felt like he knew this whole thing had just slipped completely out of his hands. And that's where it gets complicated for Cleveland's front office. Because Gabriel wasn't just any rookie QB. He was a third-round investment, a calculated pick, part of a plan. He knew the system. He ran similar structures in college. He was supposed to be the bridge steady, teachable, predictable. But plans don't matter when the locker room no longer believes in the plan. And as Wednesday's practice ended, no one needed a team meeting or press conference to explain what happened. They saw it. They felt it. They reacted to it in real time. Shedeur Sanders didn't just win reps. He won rhythm. He won the room. And by the time the sun set on that practice field, he'd already won control of the offense. Wednesday afternoon didn't just mark the end of a quarterback competition. It triggered a chain reaction, one that's still unfolding inside Browns headquarters. Everything changed, but not in the way the franchise originally planned. Let's start with the obvious. Shedeur Sanders showed up as a fifth-round project, a long-term stash, thoughtful pick by the ownership group, low risk, raw talent. They never expected him to take over the building in his first real install, but that's exactly what happened. His poise, his control, his command of timing and rhythm, all of it exposed something that had been quietly gnawing at Cleveland's quarterback room for weeks. The plan wasn't working. Dylan Gabriel, their third-rounder, handpicked by this front office to be the guy in waiting, wasn't keeping up. And on Wednesday, that disconnect became impossible to ignore. Let's break this down from a team-building perspective. Coaches wanted stability. Familiarity, a guy who understood Stefanski's install from day one. Scouts wanted development potential. They liked Gabriel's mechanics, calm demeanor, clean release. Ownership, meanwhile, moved behind the scenes. They wanted spark, edge, something the locker room could rally around, a presence, not just a prospect. When Sanders fell to day 3, ownership leaned in hard. They pushed, they made phone calls. Sources say front office tension around that pick started long before the draft even ended. Some executives felt it was unnecessary controversy. Others saw it as a gamble on brand over production. But here's the thing. Controversy's only a risk until the guy walks into your building and wins the job with zero help. And that's what Shedeur just did. That one practice accelerated the Browns' entire quarterback timeline by months, maybe even years. Suddenly, the team has a 5th-round rookie performing like a day-one starter, with coaches shifting game plans and veterans lining up behind him like he's a 10-year pro. That leaves Gabriel. Where exactly? Sources close to the situation say both his agent and camp have quietly begun exploring scenarios. One insider told us, Gabriel's looking at the landscape, evaluating other rosters, seeing where his development won't be buried under spotlight or pressure. Translation: trade possibilities are on the table, because you don't want your client, especially a rookie quarterback, buried behind someone the room has already chosen. Let's not forget, the Browns spent solid capital on Dylan Gabriel. They wanted and needed that pick to develop into something that could justify passing on bigger names earlier in the draft. But after Wednesday, most inside the facility are struggling to justify that selection at all. So what happens now? Publicly, nothing. Expect vanilla press conferences, quotes like "both guys are improving" and "we're still evaluating reps." But internally, the discussion has already moved past rep counts and play-action mechanics. It's about how soon you can name Shedeur the guy without formally starting a firestorm. And don't underestimate the weight of the moment. Front office credibility is on the line. Coaches' preseason plans have been blown to pieces. Ownership? Quiet right now, but sitting quietly vindicated. Because what they felt in their gut on draft night just showed up on tape, on the field, and in the hearts of their players. And meanwhile, in locker rooms across the league, other teams are watching. Execs, coordinators, quarterback coaches, all asking the same question: how did the Browns mess up the pecking order this badly? And still fall into a franchise guy? Gabriel may still have answers. He could rebound. His talent isn't gone. But in this league, momentum is merciless, and once it leaves you in the dust, getting it back feels impossible. As one Browns player reportedly put it, Shedeur didn't wait. He didn't ask. He just took it. And we followed. And when you have command, timing, maturity, and respect, the depth chart isn't written in ink. It gets rewritten in real time. On Wednesday afternoon, everyone at Browns camp watched it happen. You can call it a breakout. You can call it a camp surprise. But don't call it a competition anymore, because it's not. Wednesday's practice ended the debate, not with an announcement, not with a depth chart change, but with performance, presence, and a locker room that spoke loud and clear without saying a word. Shedeur Sanders didn't wait his turn. He didn't play politics. He didn't even celebrate the takeover. He just showed up, ran the offense like a franchise quarterback, and let the team itself decide who should lead it. And Dylan Gabriel? He watched it all unfold in real time and couldn't stop the current from pulling him under. This wasn't a bad rep. It wasn't one bad throw. It was an organizational shift created by one practice and backed by every player who saw the difference firsthand. And while coaches might delay the inevitable with vague quotes and safe answers, the damage is done. The momentum has spoken. The team has chosen. Now, the only question left is simple. Will the Browns just admit what everyone already knows? Because no matter what they write on the quarterback depth chart tomorrow, everyone in that building knows who their leader is today. Thanks for watching. If you've been following this quarterback battle from draft night to this dramatic shift, drop a comment below. Do you think Shedeur should start week 1? Or should the Browns stick to the original plan? And if you want more behind-the-scenes stories just like this one, where camps aren't controlled by press teams but by performance, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and we'll keep bringing you what the cameras won't show you. Until next time, keep watching what really matters.